And we will get going. I want to thank you all for being here today and being part of our ongoing discussion on the Concurrent Enrollment Advisory Group on Faculty Qualifications. Today, we're honored to have Eric Martin and Zach Waymer from the Higher Learning Commission to join us. Before I dive in, I just want to do a quick housekeeping notes. One, if you want to, just jot down your questions and we can hold them till the end, unless there's an absolute burning question. Just as a friendly heads up, we are recording this session and we're going to post it on our website afterward, just so you're aware of that. After this presentation, we will provide the PDF of it to all of you who attend. So we're so happy you are here. We will also link this video on our website and we'll put that in a follow-up email. So now could we please give a warm welcome to Zach and Eric from the Higher Learning Commission. Thanks for being here.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having us. Beth, could I ask if you could turn off the doorbell for people entering, if that's possible? It's kind of an annoying background noise.
Yeah.
Eric and I have, as Beth said, I'm Zach Waymer, the Government Affairs Officer at the Higher Learning Commission. I have been with HLC for 10 years now, and I've been there the entire time during our journey with the revision of the faculty credentialing requirements. So I probably have engaged with a lot of you over the years. I'm here with my great colleague, Eric Martin, our Senior Vice President. He's going to talk about the actual policies and procedures when we get to that point. We have about 20 minutes worth of content here today. Beth, if we could go ahead and move through to the elevator speech slide, please. Thank you.
Sure.
And just making sure if you should be on the right flight for, we're talking about HLC's faculty qualifications requirements today. So I just want to give you a little bit of a couple high level overview things. So there are two things we do as an accreditor, two main things, and you're probably well aware of a lot of things that the Higher Learning Commission does. But the two main prongs of our work are as an academic quality assurance entity. And we do that for institutions of higher education only. We do it nationally. We used to be a regional accreditor in a 19-state region, but when the rules changed in the last administration, we took advantage of that and changed our scope and our recognition with the U.S. Secretary of Education to become a national accreditor, which basically means that we would be willing to review an application from an institution from any state in the country. And then the second thing that's important is by way of our assurance of academic quality of the institutions we accredit, we serve as the link to federal student aid. And the portfolio for HLC institutions each year comes out to about $30 billion in Title IV student aid. Next slide, please. Just a little bit. That's okay. A little bit more brief background. We've been around for a really long time. We are a private organization. I think partly because of our name and partly because of our role, a lot of people think we're part of the government, but we're actually a non-governmental entity. We're a private nonprofit organization, and we have about 1,000 member institutions. We are the largest accreditor in the United States. We also have a few. We have a few institutions that are not accredited yet that are members, but they are called candidates. So they are trying to achieve accreditation status with us. Next slide. Our jurisdiction, I already mentioned. It's the entire country, and the traditional region we had, and I beg your pardon, I'm so sorry for the error. I did not catch the slide. This is This is a recycle of a presentation about a month ago, but the MEC region, it should say, completely 100% overlaps with the HLC traditional region. So all, Beth, is it 12 states, all 12 MEC states, I believe? Yeah, so
Yes,
every MEC state is also a traditional HLC state. So we've had a really great long relationship with MEC, and all the agencies, all the state agencies within the MEC region, higher ed, governor's offices, legislators, et cetera. And so we've engaged extensively with what we like to call our state partners on our policy and processes, both in terms of policy revisions and also in terms of the way we develop our processes. Um, so I was saying we've had hundreds, if not, it seems like thousands of conversations at this point with states and national stakeholders like NACEP, with K-12, with MEC, with other regional compacts, NEBI, SREB, and WICHE, just about instructor qualifications. We've also had conversations with them about several other policies. And so I just want to mention that we do have extensive engagement with the state partners within our both inside our traditional region and also outside of our traditional region. And then if we could move to the next slide, and if everybody could please mute, I'm getting some background noise. Make sure you're muted, please. Um,
Hey, Zach, you're muted now.
all right, I unmuted myself. Can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay. So just a little snapshot of our institutional makeup. About a third of our members are associate's degree granting institutions. And then you can see the rest there. It breaks out into master's and then 15% baccalaureate. That would mean baccalaureate only. So up to baccalaureate, up to master's, up to associates. Enrollment, we have almost 5 million students amongst our accredited institutions. And I think you'll all be interested in this. About 700,000 of those students come from dual enrollment. And that's a big growth area for institutions. When we look at year over year growth of different enrollment categories, dual enrollment increased from our year over year snapshot 10%. It was a 10% increase year over year. So that was the most significant area of enrollment growth for our institutions. Employment, you can see, over 1 million faculty, staff, and administrators employed by way of the institutions we accredit. And then, ultimately, what we're all helping students do is achieve and earn a credential. And you can see over 1 million degrees were awarded in 2022. And on its own, not contained within degrees, but separate line item, 270,000 certificates. And we're seeing growth in that certificate area. And then I want to talk about the Peer Corps. This is the heart of what we do. It's a voluntary peer review system. And that means our institutional faculty, staff, and administrators review the institutions that we accredit. So it's a voluntary, low-cost process that helps assure the quality, while at the same time, if this kind of process was like replicated by, governments, it would cost, I'll just say, a lot of money to replicate a peer review system like this. So we have almost 1,500 volunteer peer reviewers. And if we move on to the next slide, our accreditation processes, excuse me, substantive change applications come from about a third of our institutions every year, and include those different types of applications I put up there. I won't spend a lot of time digging into the details today, but every institution, I'm sorry, about a third of our members are going through their pathway review processes every year. and then every member. So this is one thing that I think people that aren't experts in accreditation don't realize, that actually every institution is having some sort of accreditation process every single year, which is an important quality assurance factor. And so every institution has to provide its institutional update to us, and that includes their financial and non-financial indicators. So just a very important thing to note. This isn't just something that happens in year 5 and then year 10. This is actually happening all the time. And then if we could go on to, let's see here, I'm working off 2 screens right now because I have my notes on one and not notes on the other. Oh, I just wanted to mention our programs and events because you're all welcome to attend any of these, and we hope that you will. We have a really robust elective programming, workshops and events every year with over 1,000 participants, and that includes member institutions. It can include people not from member institutions. Our annual conference, which we just had in April, had about 4,000 attendees. And then I do a lot of work with state partnership and other types of outreach and engagement. So I always say that you're all welcome to attend these types of things. If you go to our website under workshops and academies, you can see some of the elective programming we offer. Then last, before I turn it over to Eric, I wanted to mention our policy process. And I already alluded to this earlier, that it's a very engaged, interactive process, both with our members, who are our main audience for these things, but also further than that, extended external stakeholders. Like I said, K-12 on this policy specifically, state higher education agencies, state legislators, governor's offices, et cetera. Other national organizations that have an interest in dual credit policy. So how we design our policies, which then become procedures and processes, is we have 2 committees. So Eric and I both serve on our internal policy committee. That's a staff level committee, and we meet 3 times before every board meeting. And we have a constant agenda of policies and procedures that we're looking over for review. And then the Committee on Accreditation is where our work eventually ends up at the trustee level, and they review those policies as well. And I've got some background noise again, so if you all could mute, please. And then the policy adoption process, I wanted to mention that because we don't just put a policy into place and then adopt it on the first, what we call reading, the first reading. So the first reading is put forward to the trustees, and they either vote or to adopt it or not. They're usually adopted. I can't think of a time when they haven't been. And I'm sorry, I'm misspeaking a bit. It's not adopted on the first reading, but they will vote to move it forward on the first reading. Then we have the public comment period. And that's on our website, where any member of the public, including our member institutions, can provide a comment on those from first reading. After first reading, we then review those comments during the comment period, and we'll make any needed adjustments, after our own internal conversations, maybe engagement with external stakeholders. We will make refinements before it goes forward to the next meeting of the board for the second reading and adoption. And once it's adopted at that meeting, then the policy is in effect. So that's essentially what happened with the faculty qualifications revision, except we did one thing a little different this time. We had a test, a beta policy that we put out even before first reading to our members, and also folks like you, state people with state interest or state concerns. And so we did a test policy before we even designed the first reading policy and took it to the board. So that was a little different. So I just wanted to give that all to you in a nutshell, a very high level overview of HLC, a high level overview of our policy process. And then I'm going to mute and turn it over to my colleague, Eric. Thank you all.
Great. Thanks, Zach. Appreciate that. Couple housekeeping items on my end. If there is background noise going forward, it's probably my house. So I will try to navigate that terrain. Comcast has decided to replace lines, and my dogs are not happy about this. So we will see if everybody holds it together here for the next few minutes at this address. The other thing that Zach had mentioned, we had done this presentation for Southern Regional Education Board, but that was last month. And since last month, we've had the annual conference. So some of the following will get situated a little differently. You're getting information that they did not. So let's get into the policy side of things. And we're working today from the current criteria, the criteria that are in place. If you were at the annual conference, you heard or potentially participated in listening sessions for the new criteria. And we can map in that conversation later. But for today, this is what exists and is in place now. And core component 3C is the one where faculty qualifications starts to get invoked. So it's talking about having institution has faculty and staff needed for effective and high quality programs and so on. Criterion 5, core component 5A touches on this, but 3C obviously is heart and soul. If we go to the assumed practice, the next slide that's mapped, this is the one that was, and we've highlighted here the was part that was essentially so energized in prior conversations where talking about master's degree in the field, subfield, or at least 18 credit hours at the master's level, and so on. Obviously, we won't need to read this entire thing, but this was the version that came around about 2015 and really was in place until last November when we got to the following slide, which presents now the revised assumed practice. So here's what B2A looks like today. I'm sure you have seen this, and I'm sure there was lots of conversation about it when this revision did take place. A couple of phrases in here I think are interesting. Obviously, there's a highlight for the main ways to demonstrate faculty qualifications, and what is attempted here is to provide some post-pandemic flexibilities, including this idea of progress toward a credential. But even ahead of that, that very first line, I think, is one that situates this whole policy change where it says the institution establishes. And that's not an accident. And as we look at some of the details around this core component, or around this assumed practice, I think that will become more clear in the next few minutes. So next slide is basically the mirror of the 5A. And so we don't need to spend a lot of time here, but 5A talks about leadership and making sure that there are resources and involvement, and this gets at that as well. So all good, Beth. We can go to reasonable policies and procedures. So this gets at the deeper dive, and this is really all conveyed as well in a guidelines document that supports this policy. Any number of these bullet points here, I think, are important ones, but the first one is also the first one for reasons developed and implemented by the institution as opposed to an accreditation agency or any other agency developing these. And then I particularly resonate with the middle portion here that talks about transparent, consistently implemented, and regularly reviewed by the institution. And I think in large part, we'll talk more about peer review in a minute, but peer reviewers will certainly be looking at these three elements in particular, which is really the case for all the policies that the institution has, that they're transparent, consistently implemented, and regularly reviewed. Not to mitigate or minimize these other bullets, but those will leap out at me from that list, so I thought I'd pass that along. The next slide talks about the achievement of academic credentials. And obviously, this first item is sort of and remains the coin of the realm, academic degree relevant to what is being taught and one level above. Throughout these, though, you'll notice that there's more use of the word generally and typically. Those words come in more frequently here. So in these additional bullets, you see general education, other non-occupational courses, typically master's degree or higher. The next one, generally in the discipline or subfield. And so you see that allowances are being made here and some flexibilities are being suggested. In the next area, this progress toward credentials, this is the new one I just mentioned. And I think what is important here is that given the shortage of high school faculty and teachers right now and the challenges with them pursuing graduate coursework and the extended challenges of that being relevant to dual credit, part of what our Board of Trustees was thinking and reacted well as staff proposed this was to make some allowance, but not make this a permanent basis for qualification. So certainly understand that people are going to potentially take longer than they may have in the past to complete a credential, but also, don't want that going for a decade or more. So that's what's implied here with that particular language and what's allowed. Equivalent experience in the past, tested experience, equivalent experience to us feels like a more appropriate title. Much of this language is really the same as what you may have seen before, that it's commiserate with achievement and academic credentials, that institution is taking the time to map and see, okay, this person may not have a particular degree, but here's how we can defend their experience and other qualifications to say that they are qualified. So this one works much as before. And in this sort of final category here, we wanted to really underscore that this applies to everybody who's delivering instruction for credit. So in this case, this audience I know is most interested in dual enrollment partners, but we certainly also underscore this for contractual and consortial relationships, and that ensuring all of our institutions, whether it's a dual credit space or another, are aware that whoever they're hiring to deliver instruction really falls into this policy, and the institution needs to be mindful of that. Oh, first dog. I hope you're not being deafened by that. When we get to the institutional policies here, institutions are responsible for establishing their own policies and procedures regarding faculty qualifications. That's true for all of our requirements, but we want to underscore that that's certainly the case and remains the case. And we also want to acknowledge that a lot of institutions have done a ton of work, and that they may have, in fact, many have more rigorous standards than where we are now. And so there may be institutions that, having made their way and through approval processes and implementation, are still very much committed to those, and we will certainly honor that if they are in a space of having more rigorous requirements than what our language currently says. And in this last slide, want to just sort of nod to peer review. And this is the type of information, and some of you may be peer reviewers on the call. This is the type of information that we are passing along to peer reviewers that, and sort of moving into this space. This is no longer a matter of reviewing faculty files. This is a matter of reviewing institutional policies and procedures. And beyond that language, looking at websites and other communications that the institution may have, evidence of implementation. One of the ones that I know is unfolding rapidly these days would be the equivalent experience piece, and what rubrics are being developed in that area. And many of those are being shared. And then not this annual conference for this year, but last year's, there were sessions addressing just that. And then, just like all the other kinds of evidence peer reviewers look at, it's meeting minutes, it's looking at procedures, it's looking at systems. To me, the key words in all of this at an institutional level are their ability to explain and justify what they're doing when, or even if asked by peer reviewers, to be able to do that, so that things don't just come off as random, that there is a logic and a plan and a coherence, consistency, and a dedication to following that plan, and also revising that plan when circumstances suggest that a revision is necessary at a particular institution. So as sort of the 10-minute move through the policies, We have convened and continue to communicate this through these different media, and leaflet I know is something that you all get. If there are future changes to any of the policies, and there will be some coming up here ahead of the June board meeting, not reflective of faculty qualifications, they will be included here. And just one other comment about those new criteria that will be moving into place, since we did do a lot of listening. There were 4 sessions on that topic. I was partnered with John Marr for 3 of them, or 2 of them, and one with one of our trustees for our president's program. Faculty qualifications was not mentioned, but the reason is it doesn't change. So even in the new language that the board will be doing a second reading in June, as Zach just alluded to their process. What is there for this assumed practice that you see today that was approved in November ports over and is unchanged in the new criteria and assumed practices. Likewise, stepping up from the assumed practices core component, 3C does not change. Its language and its location in the new criteria, and that draft, if you care to double check, is exactly the same place as 3C as it is now. The one that does change is 5A, which moves over to become 4A. So there's some words, some language change to that, but the intent of it remains the same. And as I said a few minutes ago, that one's sort of secondary and supportive of anything related to faculty qualifications and discussions therearound. I think other than that, it's down to your questions and our contact information on the final slide. So Beth, I don't know how you want to proceed, but we are.
Yeah, we can, if you'd like to put a question in the chat box, or if you'd like to come off mute and put your camera on and ask a question, either way would be fine. I just want to thank Eric and Zach for being here, for joining us and just sharing about this important topic. And we're just so grateful for you. I'm just going to wait a second to see if there's any questions. So far, the chat box is not filling up. Oh, here we go. From Jessica, can you share what data informed the change in policy?
This was, I don't know that there was a collection of data in an Excel spreadsheet that made this change. What really informed the policy was that coming out of the pandemic, trustees, lead institutions that are not unlike all the other institutions in our membership, where challenges were being identified, and we started to look at those in terms of patterns and ask ourselves, was it time to revisit this policy and provide some kind of relief where we knew it was going to be needed? And so this is really a result of a lot of earnest work, and the Committee on Accreditation that Zach mentioned a few minutes ago, in its role related to policy and policy approval, was working with us as staff very closely. There was a committee of staff working with that committee really to arrive at the language that ultimately was approved last fall.
Yeah, I'll just add, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'll just add, we did things like benchmarking. We looked at our other regional sister agencies to see the design of their policies around this as well. So there's not quantifiable data per se, like Eric said, in an Excel sheet, but we collected a lot of qualitative type data as we worked on this policy. One thing I'll say about sharing the slide deck, if you'll entertain me, Beth, let me fix the one slide that has SREB on it, and let me just update that to MEC to be accurate to this group. Looks like there's some other questions that have come up here.
I can take the consistently implemented if that's next, and there's no way that would be the case, nor would peer reviewers expect that. In fact, I think that's part of the campus conversation, the institutional conversation here, is to make sure that mathematics has what works for them, English has what works for them, and so on. That's going to be critical around things like equivalent experience in particular. So I think the phrase consistently implemented just means more at an institutional level, that there is a stance in that program by program, department by department, there are moving in directions that are consistent with the institutional level, and that there is some, pattern of consistency between reviews such that things aren't changing rapidly or just completely forgotten. So, but it's a good question.
Someone had just asked about the slides and stuff. We will send them in an email. Tracy asked, can you talk about how this aligns with faculty qualification policies for other accrediting agencies, perhaps program accreditation agencies?
Yeah, so I'll just say it doesn't align. HLC has its own standards and criteria, so we're not looking to align. Neither are the other accrediting agencies, but there are probably similarities or variations on a theme, how things look or seem alike, which is, none of us have a quantifiable credit hour now. For instance, we used to have half a master's degree for in the field that was taught. I don't believe anybody has that still in their policy. SACs might, but I can let SACs speak for themselves. So there's not really, we don't look to align, but we do look at what other accreditors doing. I think align is too strong of a word.
Many of those will be more restrictive.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of ASIN and nursing.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. As far as the programmatic, they'll be a lot more prescriptive than the formerly regionals.
Are there any other questions coming? Zach and Eric? Oh, go ahead, Jessica, please.
And I'm sorry if you sort of addressed it, but the the language around sort of in progress, and maybe all the language, will HLC be looking to see that it's just consistent across all faculty? This group is a lot of people who are in the dual enrollment space and concurrent enrollment, have concurrent enrollment faculty. So because it's now so broad and open, I'm just curious, is, the sort of baseline expectation that it's just consistent around anyone who's delivering the instruction? And is there any sort of lures or whatever that'll be expected around people who are in progress of meeting an institutional standard?
One of the things we don't want to have happen is that peer review teams zero in on this person, that person, or this other person, which, as you know, had been something that could happen when they were reviewing faculty files in the past. And now the emphasis here, or the shift, is to make this policy work the way the other policies work, which is to say, is there a policy? Has the policy been vetted appropriately across the institution? Is the policy being applied and being applied consistently? Is the policy subject to change and revision? And if so, what's the story behind that at the institutional level? But there shouldn't be a look at consistency to verify that faculty member A, faculty member B, and faculty member C are all at the same place. It's not about zeroing in on individuals. And if there are, and frankly, it'd be shocking if there weren't. If there are some outliers across an entire institution where somebody is working toward a credential but not there yet, or there is some continuing look at someone's background for equivalent experience and what they could teach based on that experience, that is more befitting the nature of a modern institution than our peer reviewers going in to look at files one after the another and find particular individuals. So that's where we're at with consistency, high level policy consistency. Is there a policy? Is it being applied? And is there evidence that it's being applied and followed at a high level, not at an individual level in this case?
Thank you.
Rodrigo had a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jessica. I think you have a follow-up.
Just one other follow-up is for institutions, that we're currently operating under the waiver from the HLC for the previous qualifications. Will there be any, I don't know, special directions for those as they approach September 1, 2025? Just looking for the implementation of.
Yeah, the intent of that, and Zach, I'll make a comment, but if you want to have anything to add, please do. The intent of that all along was to enable a longer runway for those who needed to get qualified. At this point, we haven't changed the date. We've left it in place. There was no reason to mess with that. But at the same time, given the shift I just described, the focus is different. So, there won't be September 2nd of 2025, some great event because somebody hasn't crossed a finish line. That was more of sort of where the spirit of the policy was versus where it is now. But again, given all of those approvals that were granted, we didn't see a reason to dislodge or reverse that whole episode and create additional confusion. But Zach, I don't know if you, okay.
Okay, we have a couple questions. One's Rodrigo. He wanted to ask, would you mind sharing your insight in terms of how the new policy aims to drive increases in equity in dual credit enrollment?
That was a big part of the discussion with the trustees, as I mentioned, with the staff committee interacting directly over multiple meetings with the committee on accreditation. And we, in part, we're looking to say, okay, given all of what's transpired since 2020, and the frustration that had existed before then, we're a learning organization. What can we do to think about ways that will meet the expectations, both of institutions and of states related to dual credit, dual enrollment spaces, but with particular concern to the equity questions that were really brought to the forefront at that time? Absolutely. Do I know with certainty this checks that box? I don't think any of us does, but we're hopeful it creates some gateway for that, improvement if that's something that's in the state priorities, and it is in most. So.
And I can see what you're saying is really trying to open up that access and not having this be a stumbling block.
We consistently heard from rural districts as well as urban districts on this question. And I just want to point to HLC's strategic plan. This is our second 5-year strategic plan. It's called Evolve. The first E in it is for equity. And within the equity prong, we have 4 big pillars that we are working on. And so what Rodrigo is asking about is actually prong number 2, which is HLC will actively promote an understanding of and sensitivity to equity principles in its interactions with its institutions and other stakeholders. And I just went through our action steps there, and just putting the dual credit lens on it, this is exactly what we did with the faculty qualifications. We interwove the components of the strategic plan, what we were trying to do in action with this policy change. Some of that was intentional, and some of it was just because it's part of what we're doing strategically.
That's great. One other question, can an institution develop a policy that is tiered based on the same position level? For instance, an adjunct offering a 100, 200 level course versus a tenured faculty offering a 300, 400 level course.
I will admit I've read this a couple times and I'm not quite sure what it's getting at. I don't know if Jessica, you can unmute and maybe unpack this a little.
Yeah, I can. I guess really what I'm asking is, I believe it says for faculty across the board is the policy something about all faculty. And I was just curious if it matters adjunct versus tenured, or can we have, for instance, can we have a minimum qualifications for an adjunct level that differs from a minimum qualifications for someone who would be a tenured position?
I don't think we're at that level of detail. I mean, if depending on the discipline, depending on the level, what qualification, if we're talking about the concurrent space, the language that we have speaks to that. I don't think we would say the qualifications of an adjunct versus a tenured faculty matter as long as they're both appropriately qualified for whatever it is they're teaching, and the institution can explain that.
As long as we can kind of justify what we have, we're okay.
Yeah, I think that's where that's at. I mean, most institutions already have something that talks about, what's expected by way of a level of qualification as they're hiring and, for certain entry level courses, lower division courses versus upper division. I think whatever those policies are, what we're seeking is consistent application of them.
Okay. I think that answers what I wanted. Thanks.
Beth, there are 12 MEC states, right? I was just updating the slide in real time. I'm going to send this over to you in PDF right now.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Zach. And just as you think you're going to get out of here, there's one more question that came in the chat from Mike. Maybe you don't want to open this bag of worms, but what about prospective instructors without a master's degree but are enrolled in a master's degree program nearing a TA model?
Again, want to make sure I understand, Mike. So don't have the master's degree, but are pursuing the master's degree and are teaching in the concurrent enrollment program.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. I'm at Panera right now, so there will be background noise.
Okay. I can send a black lab your way if you need.
Right. No, you're fine. So yeah, we are a graduate granting institution. So we have TAs teaching 100 level courses,
sure,
that are enrolled in the master's program and supervised by faculty. Would this policy allow an institution to credential an instructor that's doing the same exact thing, just teaching at the high school?
I see. It makes for that allowance. I mean, that's a long-standing model. And, in a very technical way, this language as revised enables, you're in the process of pursuing a credential in a way that the prior language didn't. And for what it's worth, that's exactly how I came up through grad school, starting as a master's degree student, teaching first-year composition. So with faculty supervision, that's totally part of higher ed staple, and that's the origin story for many of us.
All right. Well, thank you, Eric and Zach. Thanks for that clarification. And just thank you for coming and meeting with our group and just providing this clarification. We really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Happy to have done it. And thanks for all the good questions. And you know how to reach us if others come up. So appreciate it.
All right. Well, then thank you, everyone who's listening. We will be meeting soon. Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care all. Bye.